So one of my questions actually was about the 4 possible scenarios that you described in your presentation for a CBDC to evolve. Like it was interbank settlement, similar to cash, new policy tool, public deposit in central bank.
Yeah.
But you said that none of them were perfect. So I pretty much now get why, right?
Well, I mean, put it this way, it depends on what you want to do. I guess if you ask me for the current situation with China's payment system, I think the wholesale, which is the first one, is the best in as far as it's less disruptive for the banking sector, it's less disruptive for existing digital payments in China, so Alipay or, which by the way could be in a way already characterized as somehow, I mean, the underlying currency is still the renminbi, but they could be close to synthetic stablecoin, which is what we also discussed in the presentation. So why create a currency, which is retail, an e-currency that destabilizes methods of payment that are very efficient, that are already digital, and which are actually, because both Alipay and WeChat's balances are kept at the PBOC, which is basically this idea of synthetic stable coins, basically that the central bank has control of that liquidity and that cannot be lent out as a private value variable or variable value stable coin. So not stable, cryptocurrency. So these are indeed stable coins. The value doesn't change and everything is kept in the central bank's vault, and thus there's no change in value. It's not invested. It's not Libra or something like that. Well, so basically, for me, the key here is to understand that the PBOC having already done, or at least China having done such great strides on that concept of, if I may say, synthetic stable coins for means of payments with stable value, the last thing you want to do is to destroy that. So in a way, the first option, the wholesale option, is the only option, in my opinion, for the PBOC. Frankly, probably is the only option for most central banks because it's the less disruptive. For some, I mean, if you think your banking sector is in shambles, say Venezuela, and imagine a country that really wants to start anew. So the central bank issues a currency, maybe better narrow banking. Nobody believes in the banking sector. Then maybe you don't choose this model because you actually need a central bank that is the only central bank that has maybe the collateral to make that. How would I say, to call for to issue a liability, which is this e-currency that has some value that people believe. So if nobody else has any credibility, you bypass the banking sector and you offer narrow banking and you open an account, with with every single citizen. But frankly, this is not China. You see what I mean? For China's situation, or that of most kind of developed central banks in the world, option one, i.e. a wholesale option for your central bank digital currency, is the option, because you don't want to kill your banks, you don't want to kill your payment system, you don't want to kill any other e-payment settlements that you've created and that are working, and China is the best example of that. So yeah, option one, in a way, is not perfect, but is the best option for China.
Which brings me to another question. Isn't there a sort of dilemma, because the whole banking sector is geared towards centralization, and while the crypto world is all about decentralization? And isn't there really a dangerous component in a possibility of a global tech economy, e-currency crisis can such currencies or stable coins even compete with economic, elephants that now hold the whole economy on their backs?
Yes, well, the reality is that this brings me to basically the history of banking. I mean, the best way to understand or to have a view of what will happen to cryptocurrencies as opposed to stable coins, synthetic stable coins, all the way to central bank digital currencies. So the extremes, yeah, the purely private and kind of variable value to the fully stable central bank liability, so central bank digital currency, all of those two, I mean, the two extremes. I think this is a little bit like the history of banking, where you would have a fully unregulated banking sector issuing currency. So this would be the world of the cryptocurrencies, and a fully regulated banking sector where you only have state-owned banks and a central bank monobank. I mean, of course, planned economies in the past would have that monobank, which would have the function of the central bank and the commercial banks together. So that would be a central bank digital currency with a narrow banking. So out of the options I discussed, if I recall correctly, option 4, meaning the most encapsulated, more powerful digital currency, which all the way to the consumer, to the which would have an account with the central bank. And so that's the monobank in the history of banking. Kind of the central planning central bank at the time, which would act as a commercial bank. And the other option, the crypto world, where you only have private currencies, would be a banking sector which issues currency and and blah blah blah. So in a way, we're only replicating history, but history shows us that unregulated currencies, in a way, I mean, the state uses the power of regulation to control seigniorage, which is of course value. So the issuance of currency creates value to the state, and also the risk of financial crisis, because that's why we move from free banking to central banking in a way, yeah. And of course, because we learned that lesson, we won't be all the way to the monobank anymore. I mean, we already have that. So it will lie somewhere in between. So I think this is why the IMF vision of synthetic stable coins is very powerful, because it's a mixture of private and public ownership, also kind of bringing the best out of the two together. So I think that's the way we will proceed. In my humble opinion, cryptocurrencies for payment will be regulated, and they will have to pool their balances at the central bank. And now the question is, will the central bank penalize that compared to cash by maybe offering negative rates or stuff like that? Well, that's to be seen. But I think we're already there. I don't think it will be any of the two extremes. Either monobank, which is the central bank digital currency type 4, meaning with accounts for every single individual in that country at the central bank. That option, I think, is ruled out, and maybe in very small, very planned countries it may happen, but certainly not in China. And the other one, free currencies, cryptos becoming the currencies of the world, is totally ruled out today, which doesn't mean you do not want to invest in cryptocurrencies, but that's a different use of money. It's not payments, it's not stable coins. Yeah.
What about the broader category, the digital assets? So, for example, Bakkt recently launched a platform, physically delivered BTC future contracts. But the launch was, as you probably know, like less impressive an event than some might have hoped. What do you think about this new emerging class of assets, digital assets, and are institutional investors really ready for it? And does it even contain an element of this disruption?
I think on the digital assets, for me, this is the future. I have no doubt about it. This is really, for me, what blockchain is about. If you ask me why is blockchain changing the world, I think the reason is all of our assets, and eventually probably all of our physical assets, meaning all of our even, real assets, will have some kind of identification. We'll all know what, like we will be able to show and kind of capture all of our assets through, basically through very easy means. But the point is that to get there, you still need to have this relevant regulatory framework to make that investment, to basically believe that because this is a stock, assets are stock, is very different.
Mm-hmm.
I issue currency, this is a flow. Stock means all of my assets. It's a big issue. Converting stocks in something else is very difficult because it's a lot. Very simply. And I think we just have to understand that in economics, this is just my economic brain, stocks never happen before flows. It's very, you may say, but it's very important. I never change the value or the denomination of my debt if I don't change the flow. And so trying to change in a way, I think it's not working because we're not yet ready. I'm not saying it's not a good idea. It's a great idea, but we're not ready because starting with the stock is just very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Who is going to believe that that's going to be the trend for every single flow, any new issuance, any new? You need to get there by first changing the issuance.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we would have to see more new e-issuance of titles of everything. Yeah, but starting with that, not changing the stock. So I think what I'm trying to say is that I think that is the part that I find more successful about this technology, but more than actually cryptocurrencies, if you ask me, is changing the nature of the value of investment tools, be it real assets or financial assets. But because that's such a massive endeavor, it will take very long to get there. That's all. But I think that's the way to go. That's really the key advantage of this technology, more than creating new tools for investment. Because if you don't have the use for that investment, if there's no underlying
Mm-hmm.
e-asset, virtual asset there, it's going to be very hard for cryptocurrencies to just have a story behind. That's my view, basically. But I think, surely this is something that over time will work. I'm sure it will work because the world needs it. Today, really comparing assets is so difficult because we can't even classify them. Well, of course, we have some ISIN number for some, but many don't. The valuations are difficult. It's just very complex. So I think this would be a major improvement for the world. It's just so massive that it will take a very long time.
We just
to
need
achieve it.
evolution, right?
Yes, it's an evolution. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alicia. It was
My
very
pleasure.
Thank you for explaining everything.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Thanks much. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.